Welcome back. Today we're debating MPs' second jobs. Been debating that. It's been engulfing Westminster now for a couple of weeks, hasn't it?
As the behaviour of MPs comes under growing scrutiny, we're asking, when is it OK, if ever, for an MP to have a second job? It's worth noting that over 200 MPs have received earnings over the last year on top of their annual salary, and that salary is already almost £82,000.
The extra earnings range from £50 a year to almost £1 million.
Joining us now to continue this discussion is the MP for Weston-super-Mare and the Prime Minister's anti-corruption champion, John Penrose. John, with the best will in the world, hasn't the Prime Minister made a bit of a mess of this situation, whipping his MPs on a point of parliamentary procedure as opposed to government policy, and then doing a U-turn?
Well, Liam, you're absolutely right to say that both other ministers and indeed the Prime Minister has said that he didn't think it didn't work well at all, and that mistakes have been made. So no argument there. I think that there is a widespread recognition that the two questions which we were all trying to deal with, one is the general point about how you improve the overall system to clean up politics, needs to be kept separate from individual cases. In this case, it was Owen Paterson, but it could be else as well. So it's really important to keep the two separate. And I'm really hoping that today's debate and from now on, we're going to be able to achieve that and to make sure that we are genuinely trying to tighten up the rules, which I think is absolutely essential.
What second jobs do you think should be allowed, if any?
Well, Gloria, the point is, of course, that you will know, as a former MP yourself, every single minister technically is a second job. I mean, if you're a minister of the Crown, you get a second salary, you get a second pension scheme. So it's not that every single second job is automatically evil or bad or wrong. Some of them are really, really essential and vital and part of the way our country and our democracy works. But the question is, I think, twofold. One is, does your second job mean that your constituents are getting shortchanged? If it's a little bit of extra, and a lot of people do everything from being a sports referee for their local community sports club on a Saturday, no problem with anything like that, through to some really big jobs. So at what point do you cross the line and start making your constituents getting second best, not getting their full money's worth for someone who's supposed to be there to stick up for them in Parliament? And the second question is, if you do have a small second role, does it in any way create a conflict of interest which stops you doing the job in Parliament and creates some sort of difficulty with doing it honestly and fairly and in the best interests of your constituents and the country as a whole?
John Penrose, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Labour's Graham Stringer earlier in our show. This looks very introspective. It looks very Westminster-centric. The public's worried about lots of things at the moment, whether or not we're going to go back to lockdown, spiralling cost of living crisis, the migrant scandal, how we respond to a suicide bombing attempt in Liverpool on Remembrance Sunday, and yet you lot are squabbling about second jobs.
But you're absolutely right that the problem here is that it undermines faith in democracy if people can't be confident that their democracy is clean and that it's working properly. But the only reason for having a properly working and clean democracy is so that it can address the really important and crucial upfront issues which you've just been listing. So it's one of these things which I think we've got to get fixed and fixed quickly and then move on from as fast as we can so that we can get on to the stuff which is urgent and really important on everything from Brexit on through.
Do you think that you might formally set the number of hours which it's acceptable to work on a second job? Obviously, we're not talking about the paid consultancies. It looks to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, like they will be gone and they will be banned. But do you need, so Geoffrey Cox, for example, he wasn't a consultant or working for a lobbyist. He was... but he has earned almost £900,000 in the last year for around 1,000 hours of legal work. Now, do you think you have to formally say you can't do more than X number of hours per year, per week? Do you have to be that strict?
I think that the moment you start to draw a line, the danger is that some people will do... The question is how much you're doing for your constituents, not how much you're doing for other people. In principle, there's a maximum number of hours in the week, so at some point those two are going to sort of conflict with each other. But actually, if you've got someone who's already working 6 days a week flat out for their constituents, and then they do something on Sunday mornings, paid or unpaid, I don't think anyone's going to reckon that their constituents are getting shortchanged in some way. So I think the question is much more about how much do your constituents think that you are paying attention to them? How well are you doing the job for them? Are you doing enough for them, rather than what are you doing for other people? And as I said, obviously, that one will affect the other in the end, but providing you do enough for your constituents, I'd phrase it that way round. I think that's the crucial question.
Geoffrey Cox, though, did 1,000 hours in a year. Gloria asked me on live television how many hours that is a week. I said it's about 20. Actually, it's 19.23.
That only took you half an hour to...
I said 20.
Can't get the stuff.
I said 20. A normal working week is 40 hours, John. I know a lot of MPs work much longer hours than that, of course. I know that. But to an ordinary person, 20 hours a week is a half-time job. Isn't that too much? We're not talking about the fact that the guy's a world-class lawyer, which he is, fair enough. We're not talking about the fact that he needs to keep his legal practice going because he's spent most of his life studying and building up that expertise, or that being a top lawyer doesn't help him to be a better MP or minister or whatever it is. We're talking about 20 hours a week. That's a lot of time.
It is, but again, I go back to the point I made earlier about ministers. So most ministers will be spending at least 20 hours a week being ministers. In fact, if the Prime Minister is probably spending, goodness knows how many hours a week, 60 hours a week, I don't know, being the Prime Minister. That's a second job. And nobody argues that that's in any way wrong. But it does mean that you've got to make sure that you are also paying enough attention to your constituents at the same time so that they know that they're getting their money's worth. And the people of Geoffrey Cox's constituency will have formed a view on Geoffrey long ago about whether or not they think he's doing the job for them. They keep on electing him, so I presume they have up until now completely agreed with that. But I think we just got to be careful about saying if you're doing more than X hours for somebody else, you can't be doing the job properly because, as I said, pretty soon most ministers would fall foul of that as well.
John Penrose, Conservative MP for Weston-super-Mare and the Prime Minister's anti-corruption champion. Thanks a lot for joining us on GB News.